I'm Joe Laxton. I own Joe's Gym in Indianola, also co-owner of Awaken the Warrior bodybuilding team. I actually opened this gym back in 2016. I was 36 years old. My fitness journey started in my early 20s. I was always an athlete growing up, ran cross country, played basketball, ran track, elite all-state cross country runner. I was your typical runner, lean, very little. I graduated high school, about 130 pounds. I was fascinated in the 90s with bodybuilding. I think a lot of guys are, just in general. But, there were some of the heroes back then, the Dorian Yateses, guys like that. My older brother actually talked me into joining a gym with him when I was 20 years old. And I just, I fell in love with it. It allowed me to get back in and do physical stuff and push myself. I didn't start competing until I was 35 years old. So, this was a long time kind of in the process, but that, that's really kind of how it all started. So fast forward the clock, I started training versus working out. I remember when I first actually went through a workout with a coach, I thought to myself, like, I've been in the gym for almost 15 years of actually just lifting. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm like, man, I've never worked out a day in my life after I had a day of actually training. So there was a big difference with that. And it really flipped the switch because it pushed me into another gear. When you take the competition side of things, again, we're able to go further in our own head, in our own brain, in our own thought process to really stretch the envelope. And that was something I really did, was I kind of wanted to look at myself and say, I want to know how far I can push myself. How far can I push my genetic potential? It just took off into other areas that I never thought it would have. I just thought this was going to be something I could do, get into bodybuilding. Next thing I know, purchasing a gym was actually brought to me because of the time and energy that I put in to bodybuilding, the name, the reputation that I had built in the area and the community that I grew up in. And then from there, I started bringing on clients. I started seeing how they started loving it and enjoying the process like I did, and I was even more hooked. There was one thing that I really enjoyed doing was competing, and I was able to step on some national stages twice, placed fairly high, never got my pro card. Always like anything, always needed to get bigger. The coaching aspect of it on my end brought my passion out because I really seen people making choices that didn't just affect their physical body. This really affected their life in general. I always tell people, write down 5 to 10 reasons why you want to go on stage. Everybody has a reason, and I would say there's not a right reason, because your reason is going to be why you do it. I think one of the biggest ones is to win. I used to listen to, there was a Dorian Yates, Joe Rogan podcast he did back in 2017. I used to listen to that thing over and over and over and over and over again. Got these little motivational things sometimes on Instagram, and I would just picture myself and envision myself going to the gym, hitting legs, barely being able to walk, possibly puking. Then I would vision myself like, look what this is going to do for my growth. Check out how I'm going to feel on stage because of, and I would get myself in that frame of mind to take it to that next level. I was a big Dorian Yates fan. I'm a firm believer of 2 days on, 1 day off. I really did that split. I would do a chest day where it was only chest. And then I would come back and do like a back and bicep day, and then I'd take a day off. And then I would do legs, and then I would do shoulders and triceps, and I would take a day off. And then I would go back to doing chest. So I was doing about a muscle group about every 5 to 6 days. I would give it the recovery. Again, I would hit it so hard that I needed 5 to 6 days to recover from. Again, everybody's got different philosophy on this. I was big on negative failure, having somebody push you to the point that you can't do the negative anymore till I'm going to push this weight and it's going to fall on me. I would structure my workouts for width before depth. Anybody on stage would always look at it and say, okay, if I get my shoulders and my lats wider, that's going to make my waist look smaller. And then if I can get my hamstrings and my quad sweep and everything wider, that's going to give the gentleman the X shape, and that's going to give females the S shape, right? The hourglass look. Again, how do I make my waist smaller? By making my delts and my lats wider. So I always looked at things like, I'm going to start with movements that's going to make me wider before doing movements that's going to make me thicker with more depth. We need both. Typically speaking, like a delt, we're usually a little bit weaker to our side delt versus our front or rear delt. So I would structure things where I would hammer my side delts first because they could support less of a load typically. Same thing with like back. I would make sure I would be doing a lot of wide lat stuff before I'd work on my middle back for that depth and that 3D look. And I would change it up. Sometimes I would do big pre-exhaustion sets for chest. I was a big proponent of incline cable flies before doing a lot of my chest presses. I was never known for pushing like boatloads of weight. Sure, I'm a strong individual, but probably not as strong as most people would think. I was a big fan of pre-exhaustion with a lot of isolation things, and then I'd go into my compound movements, like, incline chest press. I was more of a fan of incline chest press because it kind of gave you that more of a shelf. Sometimes I would split up, my leg days between hamstrings and quad. Legs are taxing on your system. A lot of times I would separate hamstrings from quad, so I was able to do legs just a little bit more often. Am I going to lift same way for the rest of my life? Probably not. Yeah, I got some pain. Yeah, but at the same time, there's always progress. You have to get obsessed with just getting better, just having progress, conquering a new goal. Yep, you lost 40 pounds. Okay, now go put on some muscle. Now go do this, or right, you've gained it. Like in bodybuilding, it was all about like just get bigger, just get bigger, just get bigger. Get to 200 pounds. Okay, well now you got 200 pounds. Now what do you got to do? It was all about pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, quitting and going further. And if you're able to push yourself and do that, yes, you will be able to push yourself and do further in your life.